Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover that your bank account has been frozen, your favorite online game has permanently banned your account, your cloud storage has been deleted, and every movie you ever bought on a streaming platform has quietly disappeared from your library. How much of your digital life would you actually still own? The uncomfortable answer is probably far less than you think. We often describe ourselves as living in the digital age. We buy digital books, digital music, digital art, digital currencies, digital subscriptions, and increasingly, we spend more of our lives in virtual spaces than in physical ones. Yet, behind this enormous digital economy lies a surprising truth that very few people stop to question. For most of human history, ownership has been surprisingly simple. If you own a house, nobody can duplicate it with the click of a button. If you own a piece of land, someone else cannot create an identical copy somewhere else. If you own a gold coin, there is only one original coin in your hand. Physical objects possess natural scarcity. Their existence is limited by the laws of physics. Ownership, therefore, has always been closely tied to possession. Whoever controls the object controls the asset. The digital world changed everything. The moment information became electronic, it became infinitely reproducible. A photograph can be copied perfectly. A PDF can be duplicated endlessly. A song can exist on millions of devices simultaneously without losing any quality. Unlike physical objects, digital information doesn't wear out when copied. In fact, copying is exactly what computers are designed to do. Every email you send creates copies. Every web page you open creates copies. Every file you download creates another identical version. This incredible ability to duplicate information is what made the internet such an extraordinary invention. Knowledge could spread instantly across continents. Communication became nearly free. Information became available to billions of people. But this same strength created a problem that seemed impossible to solve. If every digital object can be copied perfectly, how can anyone truly own one? This question haunted computer scientists for decades. Consider something as simple as a digital photograph. You can email it to 100 people. Each recipient now has an identical copy. No one can objectively determine which version is the real one because they are all mathematically identical. The same is true for documents, videos, software, and virtually every other form of digital information. Ownership begins to lose its meaning when perfect duplication is effortless. Now imagine replacing that photograph with money. The consequences become much more serious. Suppose someone sends you one digital dollar. What prevents them from copying that file and sending the exact same dollar to someone else? Unlike physical cash, digital money doesn't naturally disappear from the sender's possession after it has been transmitted. Without some mechanism to prevent duplication, the same dollar could theoretically be spent thousands of times. This became known as the double spending problem. For decades, many brilliant cryptographers believed this problem could never be solved without introducing a trusted third party. Someone had to keep the official ledger. Someone had to verify which transactions were legitimate. Someone had to decide which version of history was correct. In other words, someone had to be trusted. This is exactly how modern financial systems work. When you send money through your bank, you are not physically transferring anything. The bank simply updates its database. Your balance decreases. Someone else's balance increases. The transaction works because everyone agrees to trust the bank's records. If the bank's database says you own $10,000, then society accepts that as reality. But notice something subtle. Your ownership doesn't exist independently. It exists because the bank's database says it does. The database is the source of truth. The institution controls the database. And whoever controls the database ultimately controls ownership. This same principle extends far beyond banking. When you purchase a movie online, you don't truly own the movie. You own permission to access it. That permission exists because the company's servers recognize your account. If those servers stop recognizing your account, your purchase effectively disappears. The same applies to cloud storage. Your photos don't belong to you because they sit on your hard drive. They belong to you because the service provider allows your account to access them. Online games provide another fascinating example. Players sometimes spend thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars acquiring rare digital items, legendary swords, unique character skins, rare collectibles. Some of these items become extraordinarily valuable, yet every one of them exists only because a company's database says so. The developer can modify them, delete them, duplicate them, or shut down the entire game forever. And when that happens, years of accumulated digital wealth simply vanish, not because someone stole it, but because it was never truly owned in the first place. This distinction between access and ownership is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the digital world. We often confuse the ability to use something with actually possessing it. The difference seems invisible until someone revokes your access. History is full of examples. Music purchased on discontinued platforms became inaccessible. Movies disappeared after licensing agreements expired. Online accounts were suspended without warning. Virtual worlds closed their servers. Entire digital economies vanished overnight. In every case, users discovered that what they believed they owned was actually a temporary privilege granted by a centralized authority. This wasn't necessarily malicious. It was simply how digital systems had always worked. Before Bitcoin, every digital asset required a gatekeeper. Someone maintained the database. Someone authenticated ownership. Someone had the final authority. Even early attempts at digital money followed this model. Projects like e-gold and several pioneering electronic currencies recognized the enormous potential of digital payments. They used cryptography, secure servers, and sophisticated software. Some even attracted millions of dollars in transactions. Yet they all shared the same fundamental weakness. There was always a central operator, a company, a server, an administrator, a database. Governments could shut them down. Hackers could attack them. Executives could make decisions affecting every user's balance. The technology was impressive, but ownership still depended on trusting people. This wasn't a failure of engineering. It reflected a deeper assumption that almost everyone accepted. The internet itself was built around trusted intermediaries. Websites had administrators. Banks had accountants. Payment networks had clearinghouses. Social media platforms had moderators. Every digital system relied on someone being in charge. The idea of creating a digital object that no one could duplicate, manipulate, or arbitrarily reassign without a central authority seemed almost contradictory. It was like trying to invent a shadow that cast its own light. Many brilliant researchers spent years attempting to solve this puzzle. They developed cryptographic techniques that protected privacy, digital signatures that proved authenticity, hash functions that secured data, distributed systems that improved reliability. Each breakthrough solved part of the problem. None solved all of it. The missing piece wasn't stronger encryption. It wasn't faster computers. It wasn't better software. The missing piece was a completely new way of establishing consensus. How could millions of strangers agree on who owns what without appointing anyone to make the final decision? At first glance, the question almost sounds impossible. Human civilization has always relied on trusted record keepers. Governments maintain land registries. Banks maintain financial ledgers. Corporations maintain shareholder records. Universities maintain academic transcripts. Every system of ownership depends on someone preserving the official version of history. What if that assumption itself was wrong? What if ownership didn't need to come from an institution? What if it could emerge from mathematics instead? In 2008, an anonymous figure using the name Satoshi Nakamoto proposed an answer so elegant that many people initially underestimated its significance. Most people believed Bitcoin was simply an attempt to create digital cash. But beneath the surface, something far more profound was happening. Bitcoin wasn't merely introducing a new form of money. It was redefining what ownership could mean in the digital age. For the first time in history, it hinted that a digital object might exist without depending on anyone's permission. No company would issue it. No government would register it. No administrator could rewrite its ownership records. No central database would stand above everyone else. If such a system could actually work, it wouldn't simply change finance. It would change one of the oldest ideas in human civilization itself, the meaning of property. And that raises a remarkable question. If humanity had finally discovered a way to create something digital that could not be copied, could not be forged, and could not have its ownership altered by any central authority, what exactly had Satoshi Nakamoto invented? When most people first encounter Bitcoin, they naturally focus on the price. They ask whether it will reach $100,000, $500,000, or perhaps even 1 million. They debate volatility, market cycles, regulations, and investment returns. These are understandable questions, but they may also be the least important questions Bitcoin forces us to ask. Because if Bitcoin is remembered centuries from now, it may not be because it became the world's most valuable asset. It may be remembered because it accomplished something humanity had never achieved before. It created the first form of digital property that does not depend on permission. To understand why this matters, we have to revisit the problem that had remained unsolved for decades. Before Bitcoin, ownership always came from an authority. A bank maintained your account balance. A government maintained your land records. A corporation maintained your shareholder register. A game developer maintained your digital inventory. Ownership was ultimately a promise. You owned something because someone else's database said you did. Bitcoin flipped that relationship upside down. Instead of asking people to trust an institution, it asked institutions to obey mathematics. That single shift changed everything. At the heart of Bitcoin is a blockchain, often described as a digital ledger. But calling it merely a ledger understates its significance. It is better understood as a global register of ownership. Every Bitcoin that exists has a publicly verifiable history. Every transfer of ownership is permanently recorded. Every participant in the network shares the same version of that history. No individual controls it. No company owns it. No government edits it. Thousands of independent computers scattered across the world continuously verify one another, ensuring that everyone agrees on the same sequence of events. This agreement is not based on trust. It is based on cryptographic proof and economic incentives. That distinction is profound. For thousands of years, societies relied on trusted record keepers because there was no practical alternative. Bitcoin introduced another possibility. Instead of trusting a record keeper, everyone verifies the record together. This means ownership is no longer granted by an institution. Ownership emerges from consensus. But consensus alone is not enough. There must also be a way to determine who has the authority to move a particular Bitcoin. This is where private keys become one of the most revolutionary inventions in modern history. A private key is not a password issued by a company. It is not tied to your passport, your driver's license, or your social security number. It is simply an extraordinarily large random number that only you know. Yet that single number grants something unprecedented: the exclusive ability to authorize the movement of your Bitcoin. No employee can override it. No administrator can reset it. No customer support department can recover it. No politician can vote to bypass it. If you possess the correct private key, the network recognizes your authority. If you do not, the network rejects every attempt. It doesn't matter whether you are a billionaire or a student, a president or a refugee, a corporation or an individual. The rules apply equally to everyone. This is why one of Bitcoin's oldest sayings has endured for years: not your keys, not your coins. To newcomers, it sounds like technical advice. In reality, it expresses an entirely new philosophy of ownership. If someone else controls the private keys, then someone else ultimately controls the asset. An exchange may display a Bitcoin balance under your account. A financial institution may promise to hold Bitcoin on your behalf. An investment fund may expose you to Bitcoin's price. But unless you control the keys, what you possess is not direct ownership. It is a claim on someone else's promise. That distinction may seem subtle. History suggests it is anything but. Throughout history, people have trusted banks that later collapsed, governments that confiscated assets, currencies that lost nearly all their purchasing power, financial institutions that restricted withdrawals during moments of crisis. Whenever ownership depends on another party, that relationship introduces risk. Bitcoin removes an entire category of that risk. Not because it eliminates human error, not because it guarantees wealth, but because it separates ownership from institutional permission. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Bitcoin is that even its creator cannot change this. If Satoshi Nakamoto returned tomorrow, the network would not suddenly obey new instructions. Satoshi cannot print more Bitcoin, cannot reverse transactions, cannot seize wallets, cannot freeze accounts, cannot modify the 21 million coin limit. That is almost unprecedented. Think about every major technology company. Its founders retain influence. Its executives make policy decisions. Its software evolves according to internal priorities. Bitcoin is different. Its creator voluntarily surrendered control. The system became larger than its inventor. In that sense, Bitcoin resembles a law of mathematics more than a traditional company. Once established, it simply continues operating according to its rules. This also explains why Bitcoin differs fundamentally from nearly every other digital financial system. Consider a bank account. The bank can freeze it, correct balances, reverse transfers, comply with court orders, or simply refuse a transaction. These actions may sometimes be justified. The point is not whether they are right or wrong. The point is that they are possible. Now consider digital payment platforms. They can suspend users, limit transactions, close accounts, modify terms of service. Everything ultimately depends on centralized control. Even many modern digital currencies operate this way. A central organization maintains the ledger. A trusted administrator validates transactions. Someone retains the authority to intervene. Bitcoin deliberately removes that final authority. No one possesses a master key. No emergency administrator exists. No privileged account sits above the rules. This has consequences far beyond finance. Imagine living in a country experiencing hyperinflation. Each month, your savings lose purchasing power. Your local currency becomes increasingly worthless. Or imagine political instability. Capital controls prevent money from leaving the country. Banks restrict withdrawals. Governments freeze assets. Historically, protecting wealth required physically transporting gold, cash, or valuable possessions across borders. That process was dangerous, heavy, visible, sometimes impossible. Bitcoin introduces an extraordinary alternative. A person can memorize 12 or 24 recovery words, cross an international border carrying nothing, arrive safely, restore access to their wealth anywhere in the world. No gold bars, no armored vehicles, no hidden cash, just knowledge. This is not science fiction. It is a capability unique in human history. For the first time, substantial wealth can exist entirely within information that only its owner controls. The implications extend beyond economics. Property rights have always formed the foundation of individual freedom. The ability to own land encouraged agriculture. The ability to own businesses encouraged entrepreneurship. The ability to own inventions encouraged innovation. Ownership creates incentives. It allows individuals to plan for the future, to save, to invest, to build. Without secure property rights, prosperity becomes fragile. Bitcoin asks an entirely new question. What happens when secure property rights finally exist in cyberspace? Not platform-dependent property, not account-based property, not permission-based property, but genuine digital property. Property protected by mathematics rather than reputation, by cryptography rather than politics, by decentralized consensus rather than centralized authority. This does not mean Bitcoin solves every problem. Private keys can still be lost. Mistakes can still happen. Scams still exist. Markets remain volatile. Technology cannot eliminate every human weakness, but these challenges do not diminish Bitcoin's central achievement. They simply remind us that true ownership always comes with responsibility. If someone owns physical gold, they must secure it. If someone owns a house, they must maintain it. If someone owns Bitcoin, they must protect their private keys. Responsibility is not a flaw of ownership. It is one of its defining characteristics. For generations, people assumed that digital property would always require digital landlords. Someone would always own the servers. Someone would always manage the database. Someone would always have the power to decide. Bitcoin quietly proved that assumption wrong. Its greatest innovation was never faster payments, nor anonymous transactions, nor speculative investment. Its greatest innovation was creating a digital object that can belong to someone in the fullest sense of the word. A form of property that exists without depending on trust in any institution. Perhaps future historians will not describe Bitcoin as the invention of digital money. Perhaps they will describe it as the moment humanity extended one of civilization's oldest principles into an entirely new frontier. The right to own, not because someone granted permission, not because a corporation maintained a database, not because a government issued a certificate, but because mathematics made ownership possible. If that interpretation is correct, then Bitcoin's true legacy has very little to do with its market price. Prices rise, prices fall. Markets boom, markets crash. history remembers much larger transformations. The printing press was not important because of the cost of ink. The internet was not revolutionary because of the price of computers. Likewise, Bitcoin may ultimately matter not because one coin is worth $1 million or $10 million, but because it answered a question that had remained unsolved since the birth of the digital age. Can something exist on the internet that is truly, unquestionably, and exclusively yours? For the first time in history, the answer appears to be yes. And that may prove to be Bitcoin's greatest invention of all.